of the brain are communicating or working together. This is a different map of the brain that has the nose would be here, and each of these little would be the ears. Each circle is one of the 19 electrodes we use here, and this is our color code. It's a little different. White's average, orange is high, and blue is too low. And how you're reading this is if an area is white, which they all should be, that means this part of the brain is communicating well with the other parts. If an area is too blue, that means these parts of the brain are not working well with the other parts of the brain. Now, coherence doesn't necessarily mean that you're physically connected. So let me give you an example of what coherence would be. You're listening to me talk right now, and so you're using your auditory, which is usually more in the left side of the brain. You're looking at the screen, so you're using your visual areas, which are in the back of the brain, and hopefully you're paying attention and not daydreaming, and you're using the front part of your brain. So they should all be working together. But people, with Asperger's, the right side of their brain, right here in the right parietal temporary, right by the ear, those parts of the brain are not working well and not communicating with the front part of the brain that pays attention. So this is the pattern we see with most of our children and adults with Asperger's. The amazing thing is we can treat that area of the brain with neurofeedback. My colleague, Dr. Coben, that I wrote this big review article that's coming out this month, did a study, and he did neurofeedback treatment, and he did neurofeedback right in this area of the right parietal social area, and he compared that neurofeedback to a group of children that did social skills training, which is very important. We talked about that earlier with Asperger's. In reality, you want to do both, but in a study they compared to, the group that did the neurofeedback in this right parietal temporal area, their social skills improved actually a little more than the group that did the social skills training, whose social skills improved too, but that was just from training that part of the brain. So you could imagine what we could do if we did both, but that's how important that right parietal temporal area is. This was a boy with Asperger's who got in trouble in school, and he threw a block at another boy. He was in second grade. Other boy got cut. He didn't get hurt. Teacher sent them both to the principal's office. Mother calls me up. You got to see my son today. He got in trouble in school. I'm talking to him. I said, what happened? He told me what happened. The boy took his block. He got mad, threw a block at him. I said, well, how did you feel when you got sent to the principal's office? I don't know. Well, how did the other boy feel? I don't know. Well, was he hurt? Well, he was bleeding a little bit, but he wasn't hurt, and he didn't have a lot of blood. Maybe a milliliter of blood, but not that much. I said, okay. Well, being a good psychologist, I have these feeling charts, all these pictures of faces, and I said, let's just see if we can kind of figure out one way that you felt. Now, when I do this with kids with ADHD, what they do is they'd say, oh, I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel upset, I feel bored, the boom, 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 boom. He sat there and he looked at this thing for 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and I let him go through. I said, did you look at them all? He said, yeah. I said, well, let's just start with one. Can you find one way that you feel? He says, I don't get it. What are feelings? Very interesting description. This is an adult who had Asperger's, and he had the same pattern in the right, all the dark, not enough connection or coherence in that right part of the brain. He was referred by his wife. They came in for marital therapy. Very common complaint, by the way, for wives with their husband. My husband doesn't listen and doesn't express his feelings. We hear that a lot. It's supposed to be a joke, I guess. But we do hear it a lot. But what happened was he really had a biological reason for it. He was a software engineer, worked with computers. He kind of worked a night shift, and he really didn't relate to people. He was very good with computers. He was very bright, but he didn't really have friends or a social life. And we found this pattern, and what he told me when I talked to him about feelings is feelings are like a foreign language to me. You may have heard that from people too, and it was such a good description. So it's very helpful to be able to see this pattern and then go back and train it, and train that pattern with Asperger's, because there isn't really any medications that do this. There are no medications that work on coherence. There's no medications that really work on Asperger's or kind of social areas. So, but this is kind of a unique pattern. You had a question back there?
Are you seeing any correlation with the agenesis of the corpus callosum? We just had a student that had that.
Say it again with the
agenesis of the corpus callosum, where the two sides weren't connecting at all.
I know other people.
They changed his diagnosis
Yeah.
from autism to that? I mean,
I-
there's so many
Yeah,
similarities.
I haven't seen that as much, but I know in neuropsychology they do a lot of research with that.
Mhm.
So, and I think you had a question over here too?
Yeah, I was kind of curious about, you said about the couple, that feelings were foreign to him,
Uh-huh.
that they were married. So how, I'm trying to figure out how that happened. Because you have to have a feeling or a connection to get married. What, I mean, how did that happen?
Well, that's kind of a side story, but you know, a lot of people with Asperger's are very bright, they're very articulate, so they can have relationships, but they're a little bit more superficial or scientific or things that they're interested in. So like a lot of people say Bill Gates is Asperger's, CEO of Microsoft. So lots of really brilliant people have this.
Is that true?
I haven't tested them, so.
But love and feelings, that's how.
Right, but it isn't like you don't have feelings, but it's like you don't really relate to feelings. There's definitely an impairment, so you can have different degrees of that, but that's kind of another issue, because I do work with lots of adults, and a lot of them have been married. Most of them haven't with Asperger's. A lot of them end up being loners, especially the young adults. So I'm going to go ahead and shift, because I know we're kind of on a timeline. I'm going to shift to treatment now. And really what I want to finish up with is what to do when we see these brain imaging. Because you can see that we can see these patterns in the brain. And you can see that they're helpful and there's difference. So it's pretty complicated. But once we do this, we want to use this information so we can treat the brain. We really want to be able to treat the brain. Our goals are, because these are biological, we need a biological treatment that corrects the underlying neurophysiological imbalance. This is neurology and it's physiological. I believe our goals are to resolve the symptoms long term without side effects. Now that's kind of a different goal than we had 15 or 20 years ago. When the medications for ADHD came out 50 years ago, we thought this was temporary. We thought kids would outgrow it at 13, then at 18, then at 21, right? We didn't really know that there was so much autism and Asperger's there. And so the medications were developed, they were developed to have temporary effects. The stimulants only work the day you take them. They weren't developed for long-term use. We didn't realize that 80% of kids weren't going to outgrow the ADHD. So they also, even though they've been around 50 years and they've been used a long time, they were never studied to see what happened if you gave the same people the same medication every day for years. So they've studied people who have taken Ritalin for years, but they had never studied for more than 14 months the same group of children that took the same medication for years and years, and they just published a study that I'll tell you about in a minute. When you look at stimulants with children with ADHD, about 60% of them are successful. Adults, it's only about 50%. The reason is they're not matching the medicine to the subtypes of ADD because they don't know, because most people aren't doing these tests. If you really look at kids, only about a third are really good responders to ADD medicine. They focus, they don't have side effects. There's lots of stimulants out there. They were based on two called Ritalin and Dexedrine. Those are the two kind of main chemicals. Adderall, which is a form of Dexedrine, and Vyvanse are some of the newer medications. Forms of Ritalin are Concerta, Metadate, and Focalin. But they're all kind of the same. They work. Their half-life is anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. The long-lasting ones can go 10 to 12 hours. One of the advantages, the effect can be very quick, within an hour. Because it's something artificial, just like even caffeine and sugar is, a lot of people are going to get a side effect. The typical benefits are, at a low dose, it will help you focus, and you'll be less distractible. At a higher dose, you may kind of be less hyperactive and impulsive. Common side effects are decreased appetite, dry mouth, nausea, headaches, tics. If people know what tics are, like little blinks and jerks that can be aggravated by stimulants, every once in a while caused by them, irritability, and the rebound effect. Do people know what the rebound effect is? The rebound effect is like a withdrawal effect that most stimulants have. It'd be like if you drank coffee every day. Let's say you drank coffee every hour and you were in a class from 9 to 5 and every hour you had a cup of coffee. How would you feel about, if you stopped at 5, how would you feel at 7 o'clock? You feel irritated